Swallowed in sleep. On February 28, 2013, around 11 p.m., a modest single-story home on Faithway Drive in Seffner, Florida, shook with a sound like thunder. Jeffrey Bush, a 37-year-old local worker, had just turned in for the night in a small back bedroom. The quiet Hillsborough County neighborhood had no history of ground instability. Jeremy Bush heard his brother scream his name from down the hall. He ran to Jeff's bedroom door and threw it open. Where the bed and floor had been moments before, he found only a jagged hole dropping dozens of feet into darkness. Muffled cries for help rose from below. Jeremy jumped into the unstable pit and frantically clawed through debris. A sheriff's deputy arrived within minutes and physically pulled Jeremy out seconds before more of the floor collapsed. Hillsborough County Fire Rescue evacuated the remaining family members and cordoned off the property. Crews deployed listening devices and cameras, but shifting soil kept collapsing into a cavity roughly 30 feet across and estimated between 60 and 100 feet deep. Engineers determined that further entry would cost additional lives. The home was condemned and demolished within days, while the sinkhole continued to widen underground. Despite extensive excavation work, Jeff's body was never recovered. The hole was filled with a water and gravel mixture and fenced off. 2 neighboring homes were eventually demolished as a precaution. The sinkhole reopened at least twice in subsequent years, forcing county crews back to stabilize and refill the fenced lot that still contains Jeff's unrecovered remains. Local and national coverage spurred awareness of Florida's karst geology, with Hillsborough County tightening rules on geotechnical surveys. Israeli pool party. On July 21, 2022, in the early afternoon, employees gathered at a rented villa in Karmeh Yosef, central Israel, for a company pool party. Dozens of co-workers filled the rectangular in-ground pool with music, drinks, and inflatables. Klil Kimhi, a 32-year-old attendee, floated with the group as conversations and laughter echoed across the backyard. As guests relaxed in the water, several noticed the pool beginning to funnel toward one end of the deep section, as if someone had pulled a plug beneath them. Within seconds, a circular hole opened in the pool floor. It rapidly widened as torrents of water, inflatables, lounge chairs, and 2 men were sucked downward into a sloping underground cavity. One man managed to scramble out along the collapsing edge. Kimhi disappeared completely from sight. Emergency responders arrived and lowered search teams with harnesses and cameras into the tunnel-like chamber, which extended roughly 15 meters below the original pool floor. After several hours of careful excavation, they located Kimhi's body at the bottom, buried in rubble from the collapsed pool shell and surrounding fill material. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Local reports raised questions about whether the pool met permitting standards, with allegations the villa owner had offered employees discounts, despite lacking proper authorization. The incident prompted lawsuits from Kimhi's family, and led authorities to crack down on unpermitted private pools. Flooded farm field. On February 5, 2016, around 1:30 p.m., Guadalupe Gomez Nila worked alone along a dirt farm road in the Sossaman Farms area near Queen Creek, Arizona. The 60-year-old farm worker checked water flow as irrigation surged down furrows from open gates on a warm Friday afternoon. A neighbor woman saw him standing on the roadway edge when the soil suddenly crumbled beneath him. His arms shot up as the ground dropped out. He disappeared in seconds. The witness immediately called 911. First arriving crews from Queen Creek Fire and Medical Department found a churning, water-filled cavity estimated at 12 to 18 feet deep and 15 feet wide. Firefighters set up a technical rescue operation, with personnel on ropes descending into the muddy shaft. But constant irrigation flow kept eroding the sides and pouring water into the sinkhole. The collapsing edges repeatedly forced rescuers to pull back for safety. As hours passed with no signs of Gomez Nila, crews brought in vacuum trucks, pumps, and excavation equipment. After several hours of grueling work and coordination among multiple agencies, they finally recovered his body from the base of the cavity, buried in slurry and debris. Officials said he likely drowned or suffocated quickly under the collapse and incoming water. His death shocked the Queen Creek farming community and spurred renewed attention to underground erosion around heavily irrigated fields. River Whirlpool Rescue. On June 9, 2018, in the late morning, Donald Wright led a group of men from his addiction recovery ministry on a recreational float down the Spring River in Fulton County, Arkansas. The 64-year-old founder from Searcy had taken this route many times before, using nature trips as part of the healing process. The group approached a section known as Dead Man's Curve and opted for an alternate channel near Sadler Falls. Unbeknownst to the kayakers, years of limestone erosion had hollowed out a cavity under the riverbed. That day, the remaining rock and sediment gave way, creating a sudden sinkhole that acted like a vertical drain. Boaters saw the water begin to spin into an intense vortex in the middle of the stream. Boats flipped, and paddlers were dragged toward the center, despite life jackets and frantic paddling. Witnesses said Wright intentionally steered his kayak toward the trouble spot to help others who were caught in the current. He was sucked into the whirlpool himself and pulled under in seconds. Rescuers managed to pull some men clear and get them to shore. Wright's body was later recovered downstream. He had been wearing a life jacket, underscoring the raw force of the underwater vortex. State geologists confirmed that a rare underwater sinkhole had formed beneath the river, creating what officials described as a pretty strong vortex. Authorities roped off the area and warned boaters to avoid the newly formed hazard zone. Family members, former addicts he had mentored, and local churches mourned Wright as a rescuer who died trying to save others. By the way, if you find this informative, I cover stories like these regularly. Consider subscribing if you'd like to see more. Now back to the video. Mine under house. On the night of April 21st, 2006, around 9:30 p.m., Jason Shalhoub and his pregnant wife relaxed in their downstairs apartment within his parents' two-story home near Alta in Placer County, California. The 32-year-old teacher's aide lived in a small community built over historic gold mine country in the Sierra foothills. Heavy rains had saturated the region for months. The family began hearing sharp cracking sounds. Jason reportedly got up to investigate just as the floor lurched beneath him. Within seconds, a large section of the slab and ground collapsed, dropping him into a growing pit. His wife and parents rushed to the edge and could initially see him about 10 feet down amid broken concrete and mud. Continued sloughing of debris quickly buried him and widened the sinkhole to over 20 feet deep. Firefighters arrived and attempted rope-based rescue, but geologists warned that the collapse appeared tied to an old, unmapped mine tunnel saturated by rainfall. The ground was too unstable to enter safely. Crews worked through the night, shoring up the edges, but each attempt to descend was met with further cave-ins, forcing them to retreat. Only after 2 days of stabilization and excavation did rescuers reach the bottom of the cavity and recover his body. Officials confirmed he died in the initial collapse and burial. Authorities later condemned and demolished the home and identified additional subsidence areas nearby. The tragedy highlighted the risk of building over undocumented mine tunnels in California's old gold country. Backyard septic trap. On the evening of March 17, 2015, 73-year-old Dorothy Brown headed outside behind her modest suburban home in the Valley Station area of Louisville, Kentucky. Family members believe she may have been checking on her dog. She had early Parkinson's disease but remained mobile and active. When she didn't return, her grandson searched the property and called 911 to report her missing. Louisville Metro police officers and firefighters began canvassing nearby streets. During the search, crews noticed a watery hole in a back corner of the property. The opening measured several feet across, with opaque water at the bottom and disturbed soil around the edges. Firefighters rigged up ropes and harnesses. One rescuer was lowered into the shaft, which turned out to be roughly 20 to 25 feet deep, with slick walls and decaying concrete. They found Dorothy submerged at the base of an old abandoned septic tank. The deteriorated structure had concealed itself beneath what appeared to be solid ground. Crews brought her body back to the surface. The coroner ruled she drowned after the tank's deteriorated roof or cover gave way beneath her weight, dropping her without warning into cold, stagnant water. Local utilities urged homeowners to investigate the history of their lots and fill any defunct tanks properly. Her death spurred public warnings about aging septic systems that can collapse into lethal, sinkhole-like traps. Searching for cat. On the evening of December 2, 2024, Elizabeth Pollard left her home in Unity Township, Pennsylvania, reportedly to look for a missing cat. The 64-year-old grandmother had been raising her 5-year-old granddaughter after losing a grown son earlier that year. She drove to an area near a restaurant along Route 30. Her granddaughter remained in the car, later found safe and asleep in the back seat. Pollard set off on foot toward a grassy, uneven lot pocked with old mine workings beneath the surface. When she failed to return home, relatives reported her missing. Pennsylvania State Police launched a search that included canine units, drones, and door-to-door checks. Searchers noticed a large, fresh sinkhole near the car, about 30 feet deep, opening into an abandoned coal mine void. Heavy equipment was brought in to peel back layers of soil, while geologists monitored stability. Over several days, crews dug down and sifted through collapsed earth under difficult conditions. They gradually exposed the cone of debris at the bottom of the minehole. On December 6th, they located Pollard's body near the base of the shaft. A preliminary autopsy found blunt force trauma to her head and torso, consistent with a fall through the collapsing surface. Her family described her as a woman who had found happiness again in raising her granddaughter, only to be taken by a hidden danger beneath an ordinary patch of Pennsylvania ground. Officials used her death to underline the risks of abandoned mines across western Pennsylvania. Truck driver buried. On January 28, 2025, around 9:30 in the morning, a 74-year-old sewage maintenance worker drove his truck toward an intersection in Yashio City, Saitama Prefecture, Japan. The suburban area bustled with rush hour traffic as he responded to routine pipe maintenance issues. Without warning, the pavement suddenly buckled. A sinkhole roughly 30 feet wide and 20 to 33 feet deep opened beneath his vehicle. The truck plunged into the cavity whole, as nearby drivers watched in horror. Rescuers arrived within minutes and heard the driver's voice calling for help from the cab below. Gas fumes, unstable edges, and water inflow forced them to abandon direct entry after brief checks confirmed he was alive but unreachable. Authorities declared the site too hazardous for immediate recovery. They imposed water restrictions on 1 million residents to stabilize the soil and erected barriers while monitoring expansion risk. Over the next 3 months, engineers pumped out water and shored walls with concrete. They used cameras and probes to gradually excavate layers of mud and debris without triggering further collapse. Crews finally reached the truck cab at the bottom in early May and recovered the driver's remains. Officials confirmed he survived the initial plunge, but perished from prolonged entrapment and conditions inside the buried vehicle. The 3-month ordeal drew global attention to infrastructure fragility, leading Saitama authorities to mandate seismic audits of sewage networks. Factory vanishes instantly. On May 30th, 2010, around midday, Tropical Storm Agatha dumped torrential rain on Guatemala City. A 3-story polyfoam factory stood in the crowded Zona 2 industrial district, possibly with a security guard manning his post, as workers had evacuated. The storm had unleashed more than 30 inches of rain in 24 hours, overwhelming the city's aging sewer system. Witnesses heard a deep rumble, the ground liquefied from overwhelmed sewer pipes and saturated volcanic pumice soil. A conical sinkhole 65 feet wide at the top formed in seconds. The entire factory building tilted, cracked, and plummeted 300 feet straight down into the abyss. Screams and flying debris filled the air as the structure disappeared into the earth. Nearby residents and workers fled as the hole widened and spewed sewage into the surrounding streets. Emergency crews arrived but detected toxic gases rising from the depths, halting any descent attempts. Geologists confirmed the sinkhole formed where a major sewer line intersected weak pumice soil, catastrophically eroded by the extreme rainfall. Authorities declared the site a permanent hazard. Over the following weeks, crews backfilled the void and relocated affected families. The storm's overall death toll climbed past 180 nationwide. The spectacle spurred Guatemala to overhaul urban drainage in sinkhole-prone pumice zones. If this was informative, consider subscribing so you don't miss future content. Thanks for watching.